Hello and a very warm welcome to the Green Bean podcast. My name's Katie, this is Jack, and we are welcoming you to our studio, which is in Devon in the southwest of England. This is a podcast where I share my creative process, which covers a whole wide range of arts and crafts, from drawing and painting to knitting, sewing and spinning, and some other things mixed in there as well. This episode is going to be a pretty deep dive into box making. I have been wanting for a while to make a box for my new Hanson Crafts mini spinner, and I thought, seeing as I was going to throw myself into the process, I would record it and share it with you in some detail. But as always, I'm also taking you out for a walk out on Dartmoor, which is the national park close to where we live. So settle in with a cup of something and a project, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Before we dive in, I just wanted to say that this video isn't intended to be a tutorial or a how-to, more of just a detailed look at my process of designing and building a box from scratch. Hopefully you will find it useful and interesting and might gain some ideas that you can transfer to your own creative projects. But mostly I'm hoping to cover my process, my trials and errors, and just show you how this thing came together. So let's start by talking about what exactly is it that I'm making and why. So I fairly recently acquired this rather beautiful piece of equipment. This is a Hanson Crafts mini spinner. It's the original model, and I bought it secondhand from my friend and fellow podcaster Bex of Tiny Fibre Studio. She upgraded to the newer model and was selling her old one, which has come to live with me. And as you can see, it is a rather beautiful piece of equipment. I'm very proud of it. I love it very much. I don't have a spinning wheel, so this is the main way that I'm doing my spinning. And I wanted to take good care of it. And it came with just this Hessian bag by way of transporting it, which is kind of thin and a bit rough, so I was worried it was going to scratch the wood, but most importantly it won't protect it from knocks and scrapes, and it's open at the top so it won't protect it from dust when I'm not using it. And me being a clumsy person, and also because it's a very portable piece of equipment, I want to take it out and about with me. I wanted a more sturdy way of transporting it. Up until this point I've been taking it out in a big ugly battered old cardboard box, which was practical but not very pleasing. The other reason that I need to have a purpose-built box for this thing is that there are lots of bits and pieces of equipment that go with it. So it's electric, it has a plug, but I also have a battery that I use it with it from time to time. And then there are superfluous bits of spinning equipment like orifice hooks, lubricant, spare drive band and brake band, and an optional foot pedal. And you can guarantee when I take this thing out and about in the world, I am going to forget one or several of those things. It has happened. When I went away on holiday in January, I left the plug at home. And then when I went out for a day of spinning somewhere a few weeks later, I took the plug, there wasn't a plug hole, and I didn't have the battery. So I'm really trying to build a solution for protecting my e-spinner and for keeping all of the components together so that I've always got everything I need to hand when I want to work with it. The first thing I did when designing this box was to work out a floor plan according to the items that need to go inside the box. So obviously the e-spinner itself needs to go in there. I also needed a place for my orifice hooks, for my battery, for my spare bobbins, both the shafts and the end pieces, because I have collapsible bobbins that come with the e-spinner, and a place for the plug. There are also some components that I don't use as often as these, but I want to keep them in the box so I don't lose them. That's the lubricant and the spare parts and the foot pedal. Obviously that floor plan is flat, so I also needed to visualize the 3D construction of this thing. So I started with the outside shell of the box, and there are 3 trays, so one that goes on the side, one that goes along the back, and then another one that will sit on top of it. And then I'm imagining once the sides are on that there will be a flap at the front of the box that will fold open and closed to keep everything safely inside. So having got my concept sorted out, the first step of construction is to take measurements to make sure I know how big each compartment in the box needs to be, and then like add that together and extrapolate to work out how big the whole box needs to be in order to fit everything inside. And then construction wise, I'm starting with the main shell of the box, so I have a base to work from as I build the things that go inside it. So I've cut the bottom of the box, the back pieces and the sides, and these are cut from grey board, which is a thick recycled cardboard. It's quite dense and heavy, but I felt like it wasn't dense enough. The thickness is 3mm, and I decided for the outside layer of the box I would glue 2 sheets together so I get a 6mm thick wall. And you can see that I've written on each component what it is, where it goes, so that I don't lose track, because I've got lots of different pieces of cut board that I'm working with and they all look fairly similar, so this is helpful in figuring out where things go and making sure I get things facing the right way up. Now I've cut the main shell of the box, I'm attaching it together with a bit of masking tape just to make sure that all the pieces fit and to hold them in place. This is not actually going to be structural, it's all going to get fixed together when I cover it with cloth right at the end of this process. But for now it holds it in place and keeps things sturdy enough while I build the pieces that are going inside. Next I'm going to work on building the trays for the interior of the box, because they're a little bit more straightforward and less fiddly than the exterior. They're more similar to boxes that I've built before, so I can get a bit of practice in with making those and hopefully build my confidence up before I work on that complicated outside and the way the box is going to close. So I've got all of the pieces cut for this tray. I just need to check that the dividers are placed correctly so that my battery and bobbin pieces will fit inside once I've got the thing put together. Once I'm happy with how they fit, then again, like the outside of the box, I'm securing it with a bit of masking tape just to hold it all in place until I put the cloth covering on. This tray is the one that's going at the bottom of the box to hold the items that I use less often, so my spare parts and maintenance kit and my foot pedal. And you can see the effort I'm putting in to make sure that all of these edges are flush and neat and the corners are square, which is really important because I'm making multiple parts that need to fit together, and if one part's not straight or flush, then the part that needs to fit next to it or inside it won't fit. So I'm paying quite a lot of attention to those details. Also on this particular tray you'll see that the back side is cut a little bit shorter than the front and the side pieces, and the dividers inside only come up as high as that back piece. This is because I want the tray that's going to sit on top of this one to nestle inside it really neatly, which will hold it secure when the box is travelling and moving around. I don't want any kind of parts flying free and getting tangled up in the workings of my spinner. And I'm checking how they fit and that it is snug, both inside each other and inside the box. And what I've discovered is that it is snugger than I would like it to be. I have to imagine that once the cloth covering is on, it's going to fit even more snugly, which means it's not going to fit. So I have a decision to make at this point. I've got two options. I can make the base of the box bigger, which means recutting all of the outside pieces, it feels a bit wasteful, to be honest, just to add a few millimeters. The other option is to take this tray apart and make it marginally smaller, which is a bit of work. It's a bit tedious, but it's less wasteful, so that's what I'm going to go for. Now I've got those interior trays all fitting snugly inside the main box, it's time to think about that front opening. And I want to put flaps on the front because I want to add magnets for a nice, secure and satisfying closure. So like the exterior of the box, I'm making these flaps from two pieces of grey board stuck together, and you'll see why. So in this single piece, I'm measuring the centre and then using my wad punch to create a hole. Once the two pieces of grey board are glued together, this hole will be like a little recess where I can put my magnet, and it turns out it's just the right size. So once the magnets are securely in, I'm trimming these corners just so I have a nice angled edge on the flaps. And then I'm using a bit of masking tape again to position the flaps onto the front of the box. This holds them in place and gets me to be able to check that they hinge open and closed as I need them to. Now I need to work on that front flap, which first needs magnets which correspond to the magnets on those little interior flaps. So I'm measuring the placement of those so that they line up exactly with the ones I placed on the flaps inside, and then gluing the two pieces of grey board together, popping the magnets into their recesses that I made, again with the wad punch. This front piece then gets taped to the main box, creating a hinge with the masking tape, making sure that I leave enough clearance for it to fold open and closed easily. And doing this, I've realised that the inside flaps are now trapped by the front flap. They won't be able to open and close, so I didn't foresee that problem. Luckily it's not too big a deal, and I need to just trim a piece off the bottom of each of these so that they will open and close over the top of that front flap as I need them to. That's all working fine now. Phew, thank goodness for that. now it's time to make the roof, and here is where we depart from my known territory of box making with right angles and straight edges into something completely unknown. And to be honest, from this point on I am improvising, so please keep your fingers crossed that it works out as I hope that it will. I've started by cutting 2 angled pieces for the roof and checking just to make sure that I'm happy that once the roof is on, the angle of it clears the top of my spinner inside, so nothing's going to be rubbing on that roof. And I'm hinging these on again with a bit of masking tape to hold them in place. Now onto the handles. You can see I've had the wad punch out again to make some big holes in these pieces, which I'm going to connect with straight cuts to make the handle holes. Honestly, it took me the best part of an hour to cut those large holes with the wad punch. I was hammering and hammering and hammering. I'm going to spare you the footage of that, and apologies to my neighbours who had to listen to the whole process. I'm cutting around all of these awkward angles of the handles while the grey board is single thickness, so before I glue the 2 layers together, just because it's easier to get through with the scalpel when it's 3mm rather than 6mm. I learnt that lesson when cutting the roof pieces, so that was useful to know. Once those are cut, I'm going to glue them together using just a bit of masking tape again to hold them nice and flush, because once you glue the grey board it warps ever so slightly, and I want to make sure that those pieces stick really securely together. I'm also using a bit of tape to secure those magnets in place. And you know by now what comes next. Once the glue is dry, I'm just using a bit more masking tape to create a hinge and attach the handles onto the roof. Now we're on to the final building stage, which is a side piece with a slot cut in it to slip over and notch onto the handle. Okay, that is all the construction done. It's time to cover this thing, which is also the process which will attach all of these pieces together securely and permanently and give the box enough strength to carry the weight of what's got to go inside it. Once again, I'm starting with the interior trays just to get reacquainted with this process and practice on some friendly, simpler shapes and right angles before I try and figure out how on earth I'm going to cover that awkwardly shaped sloping roof and side panels. So for the interior trays I'm using book cloth, which is the kind of cloth that you would use to cover a book. So it's slightly starched fabric. It's really nice to work with. For the outside I'm going to use buckram, which is very similar, a bit thicker and reinforced with plastic, so it's a bit more strong and durable. So I'll start by drawing around this tray and then tilting it up to make a template around each side. I need to make sure that when I come to the part of this covering that's going to fold to the inside of the tray, it's measured and cut just a little bit smaller to account for the thickness of the grey board. I add flaps on the sides which will secure the corners because they'll get glued really neatly into the corners, and then that flappy edge will get covered and hidden once I fold the other side piece over. When it comes to the gluing, I cover the dividers first because they have flaps both on the bottom and the sides which are structural. They hold the divider firmly in place, and again those flaps are all going to get covered by the main covering when it goes on. Finally, you can see these front and back pieces need to be cut with slots to allow for the dividers. So I'm just going to peg one side out of the way while I work on the other. I'm checking that it all fits snugly without any excess before I add any glue, because if I've got an overlapping piece of fabric where I don't want it and it's got glue on it, it's going to leave a messy smear somewhere. So I'm making sure that it all fits really snugly before I stick those final pieces down. Once it's stuck, it covers all of the flaps really neatly. It's very pleasing. Finally, you can see that the whole tray is now covered. It looks really neat. The only thing that remains is a little bit of grey board showing at the bottom of the tray, so I'm going to cut a piece of buckram which is going to match the outside of the box and glue that into the bottom of each tray so that there's no grey board showing at all. Now those interior trays are done, I need to work on the outside of the box, and again we're firmly in unknown territory here because I've never made a box with any kind of hinges or flaps or anything that isn't a right angle, so I'm very much figuring this out as I go. And I'll be completely honest with you and say that I kind of freaked out about this. I got really overwhelmed every time I tried to think about it, and I had to kind of just sit on the idea for a couple of days while I let my brain mull it over and figure it out before I plucked up the courage to actually start. I think I realised that I needed to start in order to start visualising how to do things, and then once I got going with the process, things came together a bit more easily rather than trying to plan it all out in my head before beginning. So I'm going to start with covering some parts that are awkward shapes and angles that are going to be difficult to cover with a single large piece of cloth. So I'm starting with the handles first, which I've traced, and now I'm gluing just a cut piece of buckram on each side of each handle. What I really want to do is hide that grey board edge on the inside of the handle. So I'm measuring around the circumference and then cutting a strip of buckram that I will glue all the way around the edge of that hole. I need to leave that to dry thoroughly so it's really secure, and while I do that I'm going to do the same around the edges of these slots on the side roof as well. Now those are all dry, I'm snipping down to the edge to create flaps which I can fold down. You can see that the piece I stuck down previously on the handle is filling in any gaps, so there's no pesky bits of grey board peeking through. This handle is now fully edged and covered in green, which is what I'm going for. Now, using a similar principle, I'm going to work a long strip of buckram all the way around that awkward angled shape of the handle edge. I'm also adding a little bit of reinforcement to the corners and gluing a strip along each folding edge where I was using the masking tape as a hinge. This is going to give some extra reinforcement for those hinges because they're going to get a lot of movement once the box is in action. Now it's on to the fun bit where we finally start to see this project come together, which is putting on the final covering on the outside of the box. And I'm using the box itself to trace around rather than referring back to my original measurements, because at this point I've done a fair amount of winging it and I don't think my original measurements are going to be accurate anymore. It's so satisfying to see that buckram go on smoothly and cover all of that grey board underneath. And it's all going smoothly up until a point. Let's just check if those handles still fit through the slot. No, they don't. There's nothing for it. I need to enlarge those slots, and that means I need to peel off this lovely covering and all of that lining work I did around the slot edge as well. Oh, that is so frustrating. At this point I am totally devastated because even when I glue this piece back together, it's never going to have that lovely smooth finish. You can see it's pulling off big chunks of the grey board as I try and remove this buckram that I glued. And I'll be honest, I got cranky and I stopped filming the repair at this point because I was so annoyed about it. Let's move on and glue the rest of the covering, which thankfully fits like a dream. The final job is to glue a lining on the inside. I used buckram on the inside as well, just so that it has that kind of strong reinforced covering all the way around. And I love how putting this lining on hides all of the flaps and edges and that last bit of grey board peeking through. And last of all, I just need to glue down this covering on the inside of the handles, which hides all of those flappy edgy bits that I did covering the edge of the handle. And that's it. And I've just about recovered from the strop that I had about needing to repair and enlarge those sides. They are not smooth and perfect, but they do fit, and I'm calling that a victory because yeah, it's a victory. I'm pleased that the box is functional, even if it's not as pretty as I wanted it to be. It really was a very experimental project, and I didn't have any idea what I was doing. So the fact that I've come out of it with something that functions as well as it does, and all the components fit inside, my spinner now has a happy and safe home to be in, I have to be happy with that. I need to focus on that rather than the parts of the project that I'm disappointed with. As a finishing touch, I added this sticker on the front. I've got some newts and some lichens and some ferns. I bought it from Lucinda Rowe on Etsy. Obviously it's decorative, but it also has a function. I wanted a quick visual reference so that I know which side of the box is the one that opens, so when I'm placing it down on a table or a work surface, I can easily see that I've got it facing the right way, ready to open up and get my spinner out and work. And it opens, and I don't think I'll ever get tired of the satisfying snap of those magnets, which I'm very proud to say all fit and snap together. None of them are accidentally repelling each other, so I'm very pleased with that part of the project. That's all for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I have no idea whether you are interested in me nerding out about a bit of box building or not. This is a bit of a departure from my usual channel content, but nonetheless I hope you found it interesting or useful or inspiring, or maybe just helpful to be reminded that projects don't always go exactly to plan, and things go wrong, and quite often those things are fixable and the project turns out okay, even if it's not perfect. As with all of my videos, this is supported and made possible by folks on Patreon who contribute financially to this project. Thank you so much if you are one of those lovely people, and if you're interested in supporting my work, getting access to videos without adverts and extra videos, I encourage you to take a look on Patreon and consider joining our community over there. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye.